Hey guys, I originally wanted to do a video review of the new Samsung ATIV Smart PC, which came out a couple of weeks ago, but after using it for those 2 weeks, I decided it would be a much more interesting video to compare it to other Wacom equipped tablets that have very different hardware and software. This is a video comparing the capabilities of 3 very different platforms. First one obviously is the Samsung ATIV Smart PC. This is the Atom version. The Core i5 low voltage version won't be out for a while. But this is a x86 device, meaning you can run both the classic desktop as well as this modern UI for Windows 8, which makes it for a nice transition device to compare between the Galaxy Note 10.1, which is running Android. It's running Ice Cream Sandwich on this device right now. Obviously, Android devices don't use x86 CPUs. This is using Samsung's Exynos 4, which is a quad-core ARM A9 based. They both have 2 gigs of RAM. This has 64 gigabytes of eMMC. The Samsung Galaxy Note has 16 gigabytes of eMMC. On the right is the Fujitsu T902, which came out about 6 months ago, I believe. Now this is a convertible tablet PC. It's much bigger, 13.3-inch screen versus 10.1 on the Note, 10.1 obviously, and the ATIV Smart PC is at 11.6. Now these two have about the same resolution. This is 1280 by 800. This is 1366 by 768. So their pixel count is about the same, about 1 megapixel. This is a 13.3-inch screen with the 1600 by 900 LCD. So you know, it's a much higher resolution. Also, you know, you can shove in a lot more memory in here. It's a 2 full sodium slot here, so I actually were able to put 16 gigabytes of RAM on this thing versus 2 for both of these. And also I have really fast Intel SSD drive on here. So this is a full laptop, sort of ultrabook class laptop, but it's actually not ultrabook because it's using full voltage processor. So even though it's only dual core, I mean that Core i5 2.6 gigahertz, super fast. Now the interesting thing obviously is that all 3 has Wacom Digitizer and Pen. So let's talk about that real quick. Hopefully you can see here 3 pens. Now the small one here, these 2 are the Samsung's S Pen versus this is the normal Penabled UD Wacom pen. This one is a 2-button pen from Fujitsu. They're really the same pens. They use the same technology, same tip, but Samsung rebranded theirs S Pen. And what they did was they eliminated the eraser portion of the back, so the business end is this white portion, and the back end is shaped just to fit into their silos neatly. Now this is a solution they came up with just to make sure that they have a pen you know, docked into the device itself, and I think it's a fairly good solution because, you know, I'm just going to leave it inside as a backup until you know, if I happen to forget the main pen in the bag or whatever, I can use that. But you know, I prefer the full-size pens. So, and that's what's nice about using the Wacom UD series pen is that it's interchangeable between all the other Wacom UD series pens, so devices. Some of them will have 2 buttons like this Fujitsu pen, hopefully you can see that. And most of them will have eraser, but you know, to me eraser is sort of a gimmick. it's just another tip that as it's just a lot more springy. You know, for me, it's easier to tap on eraser button on the software than flip this around, hold it again, erase it, and flip it around. To me, that's just awkward. But you know, it's choice you have. You can definitely pick up other pens like this one. In fact, I'm going to use this pen for these two devices because I much more prefer the hard tip that comes with it versus the rubber tip that Samsung decided to put on their S Pens. You know, to me that just drags on the screen, and you know, you don't really get the added benefit that actually Samsung put in their version of the digitizer. What they actually were able to do, and I'm sure this is without Wacom's blessing, I can't possibly see it being something that they like, is that they modify the firmware on these, even though it's the same hardware, same digitizer board, but the firmware is different on these to allow for 1024 levels of pressure. Normally the UD series digitizer only allows for 256 levels of pressure, and in certain cases they go up to 512 because in a couple of cases like the Exostron ModBook and the older Cintiq 18XX, 15X, and those devices, they had 512, but this time is the first time I've seen 5024, and you know, Wacom never did it because they don't want these tablet PCs to compete with their Cintiq line. Obviously, the bigger Cintiqs have moved on to 2048, but the 12WX, which is about the same size as this, is still lingering with the Intuos 3 hardware, which is 1024. But then, you know, do you really see the difference between 1024 and 256? You know, I actually have an old video sort of saying that it's not. But, you know, it's nice marketing bullet point, I suppose. And for the longest time when they announced the S Pen's 1024 levels, I really didn't believe it. I thought it was a mistake of some sort. But let me quickly show you that. Let me put this camera down here. So, actually, let me search control panel real quick. Yeah, hopefully you can see that. I know it's this camera tripod is not the most ideal. Here, let me get a little closer. Okay. So when you look up the Wacom's control panel, there's this little about button. Now, if you, oops, I'm going to need a keyboard for that, but let me see if I can pull up. Here we go. Okay. So when you hold down Control, oops, wrong freaking button. Control and push the About button on the control panel, it'll come up with a more detailed screen that has diagnostics function. Now let me pull that up on the Fujitsu here real quick. And let me see if I have on-screen keyboard. Nope. Okay. So control, about, okay, should be up. Oops, did I just close that? Nope. Okay. So on the just about every tablet PC that's out there using this digitizer board, 133 Hertz is data rate, and pressure levels goes up to from 0 to 255. That's max. Okay, so that's 256 levels of pressure, 0 to 256, 255. But on the Samsung here, same 133 hertz data rate, but pressure, you can see that it goes up to 1023. Okay, so they actually did modify the firmware. Again, I'm not sure that's with Wacom's blessing or not, but there it is. So, poor Exytron with the mod book, you know, they were supposed to be the Pro slate with the 512 levels, and here comes Samsung with the 1024 using the same hardware. Oh well. Okay. So now the question is, can you feel that difference? Well, okay. It's kind of hard to, you know, the processor here, the Atom, is so much slower than the Core i5 that whatever difference that I feel between the two, I gotta attribute a lot to the CPU, because, you know, really can't tell, for instance. So let me try to pull up same program. So I've got Sketchbook Pro here, and let's see, Sketchbook Pro. So I'm getting nice thick to thin, so really light, really hard. You can see the difference right there. Here, really light, really hard. It's really hard to tell, you know. Now it's nice with the thin pencil. They're both fluid and fast. I think the pixel dimension, I set the settings as close as possible. Same canvas size, it's 10 pixels on the same brush. You know, it's nice and responsive. But as soon as you go to, say, airbrush at maximum size, which is 255 pixels wide, then all of a sudden processor becomes an issue. So let me see if I can, oops. Here we go. So obviously this is much faster, same brush, same setting, same pixel dimension versus that. And so I'm here trying to do really light brushes. Okay, that's fine. Versus here, it's you know, practically the same experience. So 1024, 256. You know, I have an old video on YouTube that sort of says the pressure levels really don't matter, and I think this is another case of that. I know some people will tell me that they can really feel the difference. Yeah, perhaps so, but practically what you can accomplish here, you can accomplish here vice versa. But the real problem here is the processing power difference between the two. I mean, it's night and day. So, you know, you might have a slightly better advantage here with the feathering maybe, which I can't feel, but you'll definitely feel that versus it's faster, thus, you know, it's immediate. That's not immediate. I don't know. Yeah, I think I'd be interested to see what the more expensive version of this, the $1,200 Core i5 version, could do versus that. Maybe that would show the additional pressure level advantage better, but as it stands now, not so much. But you know, it's to be further discussed later. But As far as this device goes, it's an interesting device in that because you can use x86 processor and its apps, Windows 8, the basic apps that it has under modern UI, it's all these apps, especially art programs, and probably everything that you'll see on the modern UI side is a port of, it's a port of the Android version. So here you see Sketchbook Pro Express, which is the exact same thing I found on the Android. And thus, that is not the same as what you saw just now on this, where, oops, that's the airbrush. Sorry. Let me see if I can get that there. Okay, so compare that versus that. Same machine, same pen, same hardware, but what the heck, right? Well, the reason is pretty simple. This software was written for Android, thus it was written for ARM processors. So it doesn't know what to do with the extra power. I mean, it's, baseline is probably like core, single core A8, 800 megahertz, maybe even slower than that. Maybe it's like ARM 11 is the baseline for this software. So, what you can experience on Android, I think, is limited by the processor it was written for. Let's just say that. So even though these two are very similar in specs, except for one thing, which is CPU, this just can't deliver the experience that this can because of software. The quality of a brush like this, even in video, it's quite noticeable to something you get here. I mean, it's just really hard for me to get really subtle with this. You can see it's a bit rougher, and when you can really feel it when you draw it. It's just not as subtle and nuanced and smooth and just gorgeous here, but rougher there. And to me, this comes down to hardware. You can't. There's a lot of people telling you that oh wow, there's such a huge leaps and bounds on the ARM side. Well, it's just now getting to the crappiest level of crappiest processor that Intel makes with the Atom, because the new Exynos 5, which is a A15 base, supposedly has similar power as this. Unfortunately, all the software is still living in the past. So I really don't see developers on Android targeting the A15 for a while, right? But on the x86 side, it doesn't really matter what you have at Atom or Core i5. You can definitely tap that power. So as an art machine, even though Android is a much more robust platform, right? Because it's got thousands of apps. Not as much as iOS, but thousands of apps versus Windows 8. Maybe a few hundred at the most, if at that. But it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, even the best Android app just pales in comparison to what you can get with x86 app. So to me, that's really nice that for about the same price, this is $500 for 16 gigs of storage. This is $600 for 64 gigs of storage. That extra $100, that more than pays for the storage difference. But at the end of the day, you can get a lot better artwork done here, for the virtue of the fact that you can use x86 programs. Okay. Now, having said all that, let me put the note aside, because I'm going to take that out of the equation. It's just not good enough for me. let's compare these two devices. The world of hardware power difference. I mean, we got, you know, Core i5, full voltage. We got Atom. I think the full voltage processor, the maximum wattage is something like 35, and I think the Atom is like 5. I mean, it's huge. So it's much more power efficient, obviously. This thing will run for 8 hours, maybe even more. I think I had it running more than that. And this thing, which with a much bigger battery, we're talking like 5 hours. But fortunately, this thing has second battery slot, so I can get 8 hours or 10 hours if I have a second battery in there. But you know, 4 pounds. This is like 1.8 pounds. So this is nice that it's super portable, approaching your typical iPads, about the same size, but it's got the muscle to do some really nice artwork. But having said that, you saw the brush speed difference between the two, and that's just hardware muscle. But there's another point to consider, is that the Smart PC here using Atom, because it's Atom is 32-bit processor, you can only have maximum 2 gigs of RAM. So you won't ever see any Atom Windows 8 slates with more than 2 gigs until they modify the Atom processor for addressing 64 gigs of bit of memory. So what that means is when you run, let's say, something like Painter. Let me see if I can do that again. Where's Painter? There we go. Let me launch it. Although, it's probably a good idea to close Sketchbook Pro. Not responding. Just slow. And to me, that's just memory. It's just 2 gigs of RAM struggling, because I made a pretty large canvas on the Sketchbook Pro there. So let me close this. Okay. Let me close whatever else I have that might not be necessary. I think that's it. Wait, let me close the crappy Sketchbook Express. Okay. Hopefully that freed up the memory, I don't know. So I'm going to make a large canvas, 3400 by 2200. It's basically 11 by 17 at 200 dots per inch. Now, Painter, another really nice performance there with nice thin brush. This brush is 5 pixels wide, and Painter 12 recently added the multi-touch UI, so you can do panning and zooming and rotating. Pretty cool. Oh, look at that. See, that's got to be definitely lack of memory, I think. So let me get rid of that real quick. Now, one of the biggest problems with using Painter, let me pull up an airbrush here, is that the brushes, you can't get too big because it's memory bound. So with 2 gigs of RAM here, with this digital airbrush that I'm using, the maximum I could make is about 400 pixels. And with that, I get about that kind of speed. Now, I'm just going to leave this up. I got 16 gigs of RAM here, so I don't care. Same program. Oops. Same canvas size. And airbrush. And I'm gonna see how big I can build this brush. So maximum brush size you can build in Painter is 750, and it let me build the whole thing. So that's 750 pixels speed you can get, and this is 400 pixels speed you can get. So obviously the hardware muscle makes a difference. Now you're thinking 400 pixels is kind of a large brush, Not really, especially for an airbrush. So let's say you draw a car that eats up most of the canvas size, and you want to do some nice shading for the body. 400 is barely enough to cover certain size. I mean, you don't want to do patchwork here. You want to do one nice broad stroke that covers that. So, this matters. So obviously, this machine with 2 gigs of RAM will really suffer for doing anything that's demanding. And perhaps this is a really nice machine to take around, sort of replace the iPad as something you can carry light that surfs the webs and blah blah blah. But when you want to do art, you can do some really nice line art, sketching, but the moment you have to do some serious rendering, it's gonna suffer compared to something like this. Again, it's really the levels of pressure. It's hard to see in the video, obviously, but yeah, it's really hard to compare the two because it's not equal footing as far as processing power. I would love to see how the more powerful version of this, the Pro version, does compared to this, and see if that really shows the pressure level difference. But for now, can't tell. It's really, really hard to tell. But to me, this is still a very compelling device for the money. 600 bucks. That's iPad money, but you can get Photoshop going. I mean, that's crazy, right? So here's Photoshop CS6 again in here. Now I'm gonna press the lock here. You know what? I should close the other program. Seriously, I'm asking for trouble. So let me close up Painter, which is memory intensive also. Not as much as Photoshop, maybe. No, actually more. So let me close it up and show you how Photoshop feels on this. Again, this is full Photoshop. This is not rinky-dink, crappy Photoshop Touch you find in iOS and Android. I mean, that thing is garbage. I don't even know why they even called it Photoshop. It's insult. So, yeah, yes, I'm using Trial. So here's Photoshop. Photoshop is suffering. Not as efficient as Painter for brush engine, I suppose. Not horrible, but definitely laggy compared to Painter, and certainly much more laggy compared to Sketchbook Pro. So, but it runs, right? So if maybe you don't do brushwork with it, but you can do resizing and all that stuff and whatever else. I mean, I try to figure out Photoshop Touch's UI, and that was a nightmare. This is your old familiar Photoshop that you can use like you always do. I mean, only thing this would need is maybe attached keyboard, USB or Bluetooth, and you're good to go. The experience here obviously is going to be much better because it's a much more beefier machine, but look at that size difference. This is 4 pounds, that's 1.8. Now the bigger brother, same screen size, higher resolution, but 1.9 pounds, I believe. So that would be an interesting machine. I think that would be a real winner. I mean, I really wish that it had more than 4 gigs of RAM. I wish it had 8. Then it would almost be perfect. But 4 is better than 2. Actually, I had a old workstation at work. I had 4 gigs in that, and I did most of my professional work in that. So it's not super terrible, but it's doable. So I'm sort of looking forward to how that feels. But in the meantime, hopefully that was an interesting sort of overview between the 3 devices. And I'm pretty excited about all these new Windows 8 devices, especially with the pen, for our purpose, for art, as sort of the argument for what Windows 8 slates do as a touch device. I don't care. To me, it's an exciting development for more hardware options for digital artists. So hopefully that was a intriguing video for you. And maybe in a couple weeks I'll show you some videos for the ATIV Smart PC Pro. Alright, thanks for watching.